They buffed Skarner, so you can already guess what's coming. Speed Demon Skarner is about to zoom right through Summoner's Rift. Hey Summoners, welcome back to our channel. My name is Zyrene, and I'm going to run you guys through some new Korean builds that have surfaced as of patch 10.15. Like always, we're going to introduce you guys to some new and maybe even some old builds that are gaining popularity across every single role. So make sure you stay tuned because you don't want to miss out on these. Before we start the video though, can you answer our question of the day? The wording on this one is a bit tricky, but when you play multiple games of League, which games do you think are typically your best ones? Personally, I think of my first game as a warm-up, and a second or third game is usually when I play at my best. When I play games in excess of that though, I do find I'm more prone to getting tilted by teammates or making mistakes. Let me know how things are for you guys. Are you the one and done type of players, or are you grinding until the sun rises? Now, let's jump into the video. First up in the top lane, we have an extremely aggressive build with Essence Reaver Riven. While we have seen players build Essence Reaver on Riven in the past, this build has once again begun to surface and is finding a ton of success as well. The advantage of this build over the standard one is that, obviously, you're going to deal a little bit more damage. You can gamble on random crits, and when you do get them, you're going to literally evaporate your enemies. The trade-off is that you do end up being a bit squishier and having to rely on your E timing, and you also end up at a pretty pivotal crossroad when it comes to time to build your second and third items. The items we suggest you guys build are Essence Reaver, Black Cleaver, Ninja Tabi, Ravenous Hydra, Guardian Angel, and an Edge of Night. However, there is an alternative itemization where you build Yomu's Ghostblade and a Death's Dance instead of a Black Cleaver and Ravenous Hydra. Either one of these builds is fine, just make sure you try not to go over 40% cooldown reduction and mix and match whatever items you feel fit your playstyle. The runes are standard ones for Riven: Run Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Magical Footwear, and Cosmic Insight. Our next top lane build is for another notable carry champion in Camille. Camille has actually seen a boom in her play rate and win rates, and a lot of it has to do with the little optimizations players are making with her. This build we're going to cover is what's basically become meta as a result of the experimenting Korean players have been doing. For runes, you'll run Grasp of the Undying, Shield Bash, Second Wind, Overgrowth, Magical Footwear, and Biscuit Delivery. For items, build Trinity Force, Ravenous Hydra, Ninja Tabi, Death's Dance, Sterix Gauge, and Guardian Angel. Death's Dance works ridiculously well since it also allows Camille to heal off any true damage she deals with her Q. Death's Dance also provides both armor and magic resistance, making it a pretty flexible item. Running Grasp of the Undying as well as Shield Bash makes Camille an outright disgusting lane opponent. These two runes increase her trading power significantly, and outlaning her is a daunting task for most players. The thing about Camille is that she's so good at playing the game at her own tempo. Camille's passive grants her a shield so she can opt to trade only when it's up, and in other words, whenever she actually wants to trade with you, it's because she knows she'll win, and these runes allow her to win those short bursts even harder. That covers our top lane section, so make sure to take a look at the screen one more time for a recap of those builds. With that said, let's head into the jungle next. Our first jungle build for this patch is Predator Skarner. The Predator rune has gone through some pretty huge changes in the past couple of patches, and now that Skarner has received a massive buff, it's about time that this build made its return to Summoner's Rift. Skarner is a champion that relies heavily on his ultimate to impact games. His ultimate relies on his positioning and movement speed, and thus, Predator is an easy keystone to settle on. For runes, run Predator, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ingenious Hunter, Celerity, and Nimbus Cloak. Ingenious Hunter is a must to lower the cooldown on Predator. The cooldown was lowered significantly after its rework, but running Ingenious Hunter makes it so that you'll have it ready for every single gank. Even without your ultimate, you can do some pretty serious damage. For items, build Cinder Hulk, Mercury Treads, Trinity Force, Deadman's Plate, Warmog's Armor, and Spirit Visage. Our analysts recommend building a Stalker's Blade over Skirmisher Saber for even more movement speed. If you're running Nimbus Cloak, you'll also be able to utilize the synergy between them to make it even easier to catch up to your enemies. As for the rest of the items, Trinity Force, Warmog's Armor, and Spirit Visage should help you hit that 40% cooldown reduction cap. Once again, Skarner relies heavily on his ultimate, so bringing his cooldowns down as low as possible is ideal. With 40% cooldown reduction, his maxed ultimate is on a 48-second cooldown, which is actually pretty disgusting. Our next build for junglers this patch is going to be for Sylas. Recently in Korea, Genji's jungler Klid has been spamming Fleet Footwork Sylas in solo queue. This is of course a more lane-focused rune, but it is interesting that Klid is opting to go this route in the jungle. Since Sylas is constantly auto-attacking, this rune does synergize decently well with his playstyle. For runes, you'll go Fleet Footwork, Presence of Mind, Legend Tenacity, Last Stand, Sudden Impact, and Ravenous Hunter. For items, you'll go Red Smite Runic Echoes, Ninja Tabi, Proto Belt, Zonya's Hourglass, the Spirit Visage, and the Void Staff. Keep in mind that Conqueror does outshine Fleet footwork in long extended trades, but Fleet is definitely good for those quick skirmishes and ganks. You'll want to be a little more aggressive with this build because it does have some nice burst. That's it for the jungle, so check out the screen one more time for a quick recap of those builds. With that covered, let's jump into the mid lane builds next. Used by none other than the king of the mid lane himself, we're going to show you guys Faker's AP Nunu build for the mid lane. AP Nunu was buffed on patch 10.13, and surprisingly he's actually a really powerful mid laner. The playstyle is similar to Aurelion Sol, push in your lane and roam to pick up some kills. Of course, this is Faker we're talking about here, so he definitely contributes to how OP this build looks. First up, let's just run through those items and runes. For runes, run Dark Harvest, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Relentless Hunter, Water Walking, and Celerity. The reason you want to run these runes is that Relentless Hunter, Water Walking, and Celerity maximize how quickly Nunu can traverse the map. He's a roam-heavy champion, so you need to get from point A to point B as quickly as you can. This also minimizes the time it takes for you to return to your lane in case things don't pan out for you and you decide to go back down halfway through a gank. Dark Harvest adds some extra burst damage and also scales pretty well. For his items, build Hextech Protobelt, Sorcerer's Shoes, Mejai's Soul Stealer, Dead Man's Plate, Rabadon's Death Cap, and Void Staff. Aside from all the AP you're building, a Dead Man's Plate provides some extra movement speed, which should make landing Nunu's W a bit easier. Once you get some stacks on Mejai's Soul Stealer, you can gain movement speed from it as well. And here's a quick tip for the Nunu mid laners out there who want to try this. When you're rolling your snowball into your minions to clear them, run back to your tower and then roll a snowball to get that extra damage in, and you can actually clear caster minions in just a single snowball, which gives you so much roaming priority. And you can do this really early on in the game too. The next build we're going to cover is Spellbinder Orianna. This build is slowly becoming the norm for her, and there are a couple of reasons why. First is that it provides movement speed. Phase Rush has become her go-to rune of choice, and taking Spellbinder allows you to be even more slippery with or without the active. With the active, you gain another movement speed burst that you can use whenever necessary. Spellbinder is also an extremely cost-effective item when you take into account the burst of ability power and movement speed you gain when casting its active effect. For runes, take Phase Rush, Monoflow Band, Transcendence, Scorch, Biscuit Delivery, and Cosmic Insight. These runes will support a hit and run playstyle, rewarding you for landing abilities and backstepping away quickly to avoid taking damage in return. This applies both to the laning phase as well as team fighting. Next, for the items you want to build, Hextech GLP, Sorcerer's Shoes, Liandry's Torment, Spellbinder, Rabadon's Death Cap, and Void Staff. That covers our mid lane builds, so take one last look at the screen for a recap of those builds. Save them, do what you need to do, guys. Alright, next up are bottom lane builds. So we all know that Karthus is OP in the jungle and in the mid lane, but it turns out that he's also OP in the bottom lane as well. Although Karthus bottom lane is an even rarer niche pick than in his other roles, he's finding an immense amount of play and success based on region. Admittedly, he's actually most popular in the EU West server, but I felt like including him here just because we felt like it was important to keep you guys updated on the most important builds. And of course, he's finding success in Korea too. For the runes, take Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace. For items, build Sorcerer's Shoes, Luden's Echo, Rabadon's Death Cap, Morellonomicon, Zhonya's Hourglass, and Void Staff. It's the typical Karthus setup, but since he received some massive buffs to help him succeed as a laner, it only makes sense that he's also popping off as a bottom laner. Focusing down Karthus isn't enough, and if you focus down his support first, there's still no guarantee that you'll come out on top. In many cases, skirmishes with Karthus could end up with all 4 bot laners falling, and that usually pans out in Karthus' favor because of his incredible scaling, and because he can still try to clear out minion waves with his passive after picking up those takedowns. By doing so, he can hit a fast level 6 and begin pressing the R button. Another buff that was made during patch 10.13 was to AP Kog'Maw. Riot wanted to open up the game to more niche builds, and it's honestly kind of worked. This build is actually a bit more popular in Korea, so let's run you through it. For the runes, you'll run Arcane Comet, Monoflow Band, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, Presence of Mind, and Coup de Grace. Arcane Comet is the go-to for basically any long-range poke mage, and Kog'Maw is no exception. Monoflow Band will help you conserve mana and also synergizes well with the Archangel Staff purchase that you'll make. We always encourage players to build what they feel is necessary for their games, but in the case of Kog'Maw, it's basically imperative that you build a Seraphs for mana. Without a big mana pool, AP Kog'Maw runs out of mana far too quickly, and you also gain some more of it back through takedowns with Presence of Mind. For items, build Seraph's Embrace, Sorcerer's Shoes, Liandry's Torment, Rylai's Crystal Scepter, Morellonomicon, and Rabadon's Death Cap. Liandry's is extremely powerful on Kog'Maw because it makes landing poke even more rewarding as a result of the burn damage. The final build we want to cover in the bottom lane is Kai'Sa with a Serrated Dirk. Essence Reaver and Serrated Dirk are the core items, and from there, you can freestyle it. However, let's talk about why this build even works. As most players know, Serrated Dirk is a pretty big power spike for most AD champions in the early game. While a Manamune will cost you 2,400 gold, you can also purchase a BF sword and Serrated Dirk for the same price. Assuming no takedowns to add to your mana pool, you'll gain about 52 AD from a Manamune when you purchase it, as opposed to the 70 you'll gain from a BF sword and Serrated Dirk. You also get 10 lethality out of it, and the biggest advantage is that there's no gold sink wasting money on a tier. You'll buy raw combat power all the way up, instead of dropping money on an early tier, which would technically put you behind in terms of fighting strength. This build is basically a more aggressive option you can take if you prefer to fight your enemies head on, rather than trying to scale and hope your team doesn't feed so that you can carry the late game. For runes, run Hail of Blades, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, Presence of Mind, and Legend Bloodline. For the items, build Essence Reaver, Serrated Dirk, Berserker Greaves, Nashor's Tooth, Zhonya's Hourglass, and Ginsu's Rageblade. Once again though, you can build whatever items you need as long as you start off with the Essence Reaver and Serrated Dirk. Most games don't go long enough for you to upgrade the Serrated Dirk, but the strongest option is usually Edge of Night, or alternatively selling it for another item to replace it. That's it for our bottom lane builds, so check out the screen one more time for a summary of the builds we just went over. Finally, let's conclude the video by running you through some support builds. Phase Rush Alistar is a thing now. It's kinda crazy, I know, but movement speed is great, guys. Phase Rush can be used practically on Alistar in two common cases. One is that you use Flash first so that you can land your Q, cast your E, and then basic attack once to instantly activate Phase Rush. With the movement speed bonus, you can run behind your opponent and punt them backwards, hopefully getting in range again to charge up your E and stun them. Alternatively, you can use a standard W and Q combo, then use Phase Rush to chase them down and guarantee the follow-up stun from E. While you give up the tankiness Aftershock provides, Phase Rush can support players who seek a more explosive and chaotic playstyle. What this also does is it allows you to use the Inspiration and Sorcery combination. Accessing these two trees allows you to run the Hextech Flash Traption and Nimbus Cloak combo, which is great for catching opponents off guard and applying pressure. For runes, run Phase Rush, Nimbus Cloak, Transcendence, Water Walking, Hextech Flash Traption, and Cosmic Insight. For items, build Bulwark of the Mountain, Boots of Mobility, Zeke's Convergence, Knight's Vow, Redemption, and Locket of the Iron Solari. This next build is one we saw used on the LCK stage, and that's Kayle Support. Dragon X's Keria pulled this pick out recently against HLE in one of their games, and it proved to be a pivotal pick in their victory. The immense amount of safety that Kayle's ultimate provides makes her so powerful against both low damage as well as single threat compositions. In their game, the only real damage threat on the enemy team was Aphelios, who would usually suffice. However, Kayle's brief invulnerability can change things up significantly, and also makes it much harder to execute turret dives against her and her allies after level 6. Rather than the typical 1v9 solo lane Kayle that we're used to seeing, this is a support build that aims to protect her allies. Appropriately, you'll want to use the following runes: Guardian, Demolish, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Monoflow Band, and Transcendence. Guardian actually works great. You're able to provide a sizable shield, and Kayle also has a movement speed buff for her allies. When cast, it's like having the old Guardian, which provides both movement speed as well as a shield. For items, build Bulwark of the Mountain, Ionian Boots of Lucidity, Athene's Unholy Grail, Ardent Censer, Redemption, and Locket of the Iron Solari. Our final build for supports is none other than Support Swain. Swain's massive change list this patch definitely hypes him up. However, Swain was already seeing a ton of success as a support in low elo. This patch, we expect this success to spread to mid and high elo as well. Swain has some really decent crowd control, which is nice as that's what you want from your supports. However, his W received a massive buff, and he's able to scout with it from extremely long distances now. It's like having Ashe on your team. You can use Swain's W to either scout enemy jungle camps early on, or check brushes before you walk into them. There's a ton of information Swain can gather, and once again, that's something you love to see in your supports. On the other hand, Swain also breaks away from the typical stereotypes of supports, as he's also a carry that deals tons of damage. For runes, run Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, and then Cosmic Insight with perfect timing. For items, build Shard of True Ice, Liandry's Torment, Sorcerer's Shoes, Zhonya's Hourglass, Rylai's Crystal Scepter, and a Rabadon's Death Cap. The Spell Thief's item line did receive a small buff this patch as well, so we'll throw that in to help further sell Support Swain to you guys. That covers our support build, so we'll throw up our last recap on the screen right now, so check it out. We've covered our Korean builds for this patch, so that's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you want more content like this, I encourage you to subscribe and also check out ProGuides.com, where we have coaches and even live classes to help you guys improve. Until next time though, best of luck on Summoner's Rift.